Hello, every folks, and good morning. Welcome to another edition of Know Your Unit. Today we talk about the zoomy little kill mosquito, the Faerie. So the familiar class in general is something that's available to pumpkins, gremlins, and fairies. However, as before, we are just kind of piecemealing them all out because every single one of these will function a little bit differently. Honestly, they probably should have just called them the fairy, gremlin, and pumpkin, but hey, it is what it is. So, what exactly is the Faerie? Well, traditionally throughout the series, they have been the kind of dodgy mindfuckery expert, which has meant something entirely different in every single game. Back in March of the Black Queen, they were a unit that basically did nothing but slap people and make out with them for some reason, for a minor morale boost until they got to their final evolution and then suddenly just started firing Jesus lasers everywhere. We had the March of the Black Queen version that was very similar, and then we had the Night of Lotus version that just got so fast that nothing could touch them. Meanwhile, back in the original SNES version, they were something that was a little bit faster, but generally would still die pretty easily, especially to overheads. And also in PSP, that's kind of when they started getting a bit scary, because that's when they started getting more and more of their unique abilities here. So, let's start getting into this. So, fairies are essentially going to be something very similar to the Valkyrie in terms of their overall role, being kind of a multi-role type of unit built around the idea of messing with somebody's mind. They are effectively a support unit combat-wise, but they have a whole lot of other kind of unique functions to them. So, let's go ahead and start off with their skill list. So, daggers, hammers, cudgels, books, blowguns, and bows. This actually opens up a surprising amount of options for them. Daggers probably have some of the highest amount of weapons that have some free spellcasts on them. Caldias are going to be what they get for hammers, giving them access to a solid suite of finishers, as well as a free charm cast if you'd like that sort of thing. For cudgels, that'll give them their extra range. Typically, for most builds, you're going to want to end up just going for a main hand cudgel, just to get a hold of that extra range. I would say actually cudgel plus elemental shortbow is going to be a pretty solid combination for most familiar units. Then you've got access to spellbooks if that's your kind of thing. You've got access to blowguns because they're just fun, and then you got access to bows for the usual bow kinds of things, essentially long range, finishers, all of that kind of stuff, punishing broken defenses. Insight for making use of finisher spam as much as you can anyway. In their particular case, due to the fact that they've got meditate and they're already going to be zooming around pretty quick, they actually generate MP pretty darn quick. Typically, this isn't something that you need to worry about too much, but it might be there if you want it. Sanctuary for going and preventing undead from doing things. Pumpkin lore. Okay, so pumpkin lore is actually an interesting, unique case. Nobody knows whether this fucking does anything. And you might think I'm joking, but I'm serious. There's no consensus on whether this skill does anything at all or ever did. See, this is back from PSP. It was still technically around in One Vision through the use of the taunt ability. I think it was taunt, it was challenge that was moved over to the paladin. But nobody actually knows if the function does anything. It's supposed to cause you to act as a decoy and increase essentially your aggro versus stuff. Now, that being said, one build that I was recommending a few times is for somebody to put on Pumpkin Lore and put them in the center of a bunch of dragons, with Dragon Scale activated. Now, this is basically a way that you can cause the pretty much any of the major bosses in the game to go and instantly one-shot themselves. Now, it works, but does it actually work, though? Because most of the time, the Familiar is going to be a unit that's going to be on the fairly squishy side. As you see by the stats over there on the right side, their vitality is nothing to write home about, and this is after they've gotten some pretty decent equipment on them. Essentially, their defense is kind of pretty shitty just by overall merit of the fact that they're a tiny little mosquito thing, so, there's that. So typically their defense is going to be on the lower side. Their equipment access is limited to more along the caster side of things, so they aren't exactly going to be as robust as something like the Valkyrie there. So either way, that essentially already means that they're going to be a pretty tempting target. That being said, if you put them out there in the open, they're also just going to be a tempting target on account of the fact that they're just already right there. If they're in a crowd, they're already kind of a tempting target. Theoretically, this works, and when combining with the whole dragon strategy, they're not really doing much anyway, so you might as well. But yeah, and when I say that nobody knows how it works, I mean, even Rakes over in the One Vision mod mentioned that he has tested like a few different things with like the call that the game uses for this particular function. It's unclear what it's supposed to do. So, because we actually don't, to this day, as far as I understand, we don't have any actual like direct insight outside of personal experience as to how the AI thinks. So theoretically, this would cause the unit to be higher up in the target priority. Like maybe the AI sees it as like identify unit as 1 HP or as, you know, having lower defense than it really does or something. There's actually a phenomenon that you'll see when you're going and using both the ninja and the knight, because those skills also have different targeting priorities assigned with them. I don't know whether directly, but indirectly they definitely do. Like Steel Stance will lower aggro because it raises the actual physical defense of the unit as the AI can see it. However, Phalanx is damage reduction, which is after the point that the AI is allowed to see, so it's essentially seeing like, oh, I would do like 300 to that guy, not seeing the 90% damage reduction that would bring it down to 30. This is why Phalanx units still end up getting hit, and Steel Stance units don't. Typically anyway, if they're the only target available, they'll still end up getting hit. But this basically means that we have no way to know whether Pumpkin Lore does anything. I'd like to think that it does. Like, just the fact that it has made it this long feels like it definitely does something, and I think it probably does the opposite of what the Stinky set does. So if you were ever curious, combining Stinky set and Pumpkin Lore basically just means that they still have the Stinky set. This just completely overwrites it. So either way, we don't know exactly whether that skill does anything, but it probably does something that we can't identify. There we go. That's that. Anyway, Petrify and Charm as you do. I actually would recommend keeping Petrify on them if you're not running Stinky set in the later game. They are a very tempting target for cockatrices on account of, you know, low defense, low health, all of that kind of thing. You know, little birds, giant chicken, they gotta eat, so it is what it is. That being said, they also have pretty dang high mind and resistance, so they probably would be able to resist the Petrify anyway, but I know I've run this out of paranoia a few times. But now let's go ahead and get into their bread and butter skills. So, we got Virtuous Dance. Probably one of the most broken abilities in the entire game. So, this is going to be one of those debuff abilities that the AI is actually allowed to use, more than likely on account of the fact that it has a damage number associated with it. So, essentially, this is going to go forward. It's going to do exactly 30 damage, unless some other modifiers are applied, to everything in an area. Now, even though it's classed as dark, it basically is just there for the purpose of flavor, because it's an evil move. It always has been from the very beginning, that they are supposed to be a light-affiliated kind of nature spirit kind of thing, with some evil intentions and all of that kind of thing. But in the form of this dance move right here, I don't think this actually checks mind. I don't know if this was actually verified or not, but it seems to be able to hit charms way above where it should be able to. And I should point out, whether or not this actually checks mind, the mind score of the Faerie in general is freakishly high compared with everything else. This means that even without any charms or anything else, again, this is a fresh out-of-the-box familiar here, with a mind score that is roughly an average of 30 points higher than the rest of their stats. They are absolutely stacked in terms of having that mind score there, and Virtuous Dance completely turns entire fights around by itself. It's essentially 30 damage plus a charm effect, essentially meaning that if your units are charmed, it will be hit by that damage, you know, a very low amount of damage, mind you, and be uncharmed, whereas all enemy units in that AoE will end up being hit by the charm. This is surprisingly deadly. So yeah, you can basically go and charm multiple units at once. This is bar none the best charm move in the entire game. The Angel Knights have another version of this, but they don't have as many ways to stack mind. They also don't have as much mind to begin with. At the same time, the Swordmaster also has an AoE charm in the form of their Devil's Dance or whatever it's called. Don't know why I'm suddenly blanking on it. But either way, that's half the range of this one. This is 2 tiles out in every direction. Again, very devastating. Now that being said, that takes 50 MP. On the other side, you have Coquettish Kiss, which is the same effect, except it's single target and only costs 35. Which means if you're combining this together with Meditate and a skill card, you can have a near guaranteed charm with every single action that they take. That's, yeah. Again, the mindfuckery expert. Then you have Lingering Kiss, which is fascinating. This is a heal and turn reset. So essentially, if a unit's health is damaged, they will take up to half of their own health, transfer it over to the other unit, and give them an instant turn. Bear in mind that this can also combine with their naturally low recovery time, as well as the White Knight's velocity shift to cause instant kind of turn stacks over and over. So you can do this thing where you paradigm shift into a clump of 2 White Knights and some familiars or whatnot, and essentially they use Coquettish Kisses after getting paradigm shifted in order to spread out free turns. It's a little bit of a difficult machine to keep going, but you can theoretically permanently make it your turn using all of this. Again, very complicated, very tedious to do it that way, but it's just funny that you can do it. Alright, and then lastly, Selfless Kiss, which will remove Stun, Silence, and Petrify. Truth be told, there's a little reason to do that when you can just use Ease. Okay, sorry, running a little bit out of breath here. I was running around the house earlier and just didn't breathe for the last few little bits of this stuff here. Okay, so let's go ahead and start looking over what other stuff they've got here. So, as far as spell access is concerned, they've got access to instills, like for example, I have Instill Water on this Fire Fairy over here to help shield them against fire. They've got access to basic missiles, going up most of the tiers. I don't believe they actually get tier 4s. Let me go ahead and double check that real quick. Oh yeah, no, they do get access to the full complement of missiles. So just basic missiles, they get access to debuffs as well in the form of paralysis, poison, sleep, and charm here. I don't believe they get petrification. They don't. But they do go to spell charge. So effectively, many of the things that the Cyclops is kind of billed as doing, they can do better. So, you know, instead of an AoE stun, they've got an AoE charm. Instead of being bad with spells, they're potentially one of the more devastating units with spells, because again, Mind also doubles as an intelligence boost. On top of this, they can equip equipment, which will give them far higher stats and all of that, so that's always nice to have there as well. Due to wide weapon access, they get access to free spell abilities, so like going over the daggers, you can have your free meteor strikes, your free tornadoes, more strikes over there, some poison clouds over here. If we go over to the staves, those are pretty obvious, but the Staff of Restoration is actually pretty handy on them. Personally, I prefer either Purification or Restoration, because those are two abilities that they don't normally have, so Exorcism allows them to quickly get rid of a undead unit. Just kind of a solid utility option in general. Like, they've already got MP, they've already got speed. Realistically speaking, in terms of a consistent heal here, as well as a Exorcism, it's something that they're not necessarily as good at, and it does those for free. Essentially, using a quick heal on them is it's going to do the job pretty well. They're also a really good source of Boon of Swiftness, being one of the faster units that can potentially use it. Now, given their role of being a sort of a kind of a support trickster of sorts, this essentially means that you can run them with a combination of Meditate 2 and a lot of cheaper spells, so like your Heal 2s, your Boon of Swiftness, your free casts on your weapons and whatnot, in order to start off a match, and then you can move into either finishers or Virtuous Dance Spam, or if you're feeling like you want to maybe do a little bit more on the spellcasting side of things, maybe go for something like a Coquettish Kiss to just go for those Snipe Charms instead. Now, you may notice a weird choice here in the form of actually bothering to use Sanctuary on somebody. Now, the thing is, the Familiar is an interesting use case for the Stinky set. They can use a few different set effects, I believe, but as far as the Stinky set is concerned, it renders them functionally invisible. Now, the funny part is, there's not many movements that have both high movement and Sanctuary at the same time, and well, or something that you'd actually want to use for that purpose. In this particular case, there's somebody with 5 movement with their equipment set up here. They've got reasons to be pretty much anywhere on the field, so you're not really displacing them. They can make good use of a lot of different type of card abilities. So like MP regen is pretty obvious on them, the MP cards are going to be pretty significant on them, but at the same time you can potentially go for those elemental short bows and potentially get some pretty solid range damage out of them as well. Again, low recovery time, so you can make that work pretty darn well, effectively making them an almost full functional caster with a effectively longbow range weapon. So that's potentially an option as well, especially if you're running the whole Zwei Terranite combo. Essentially just break some defenses, have the fairy start shooting at them. Pretty darn effective. But with all that being said, when you're going through stuff like Palace of the Dead, A, you don't want them being targeted, and B, they can very, very effectively displace a lot of undead units. Actually, do we have undead units on this map? I was going to show them off and then realized maybe they don't even have undead. Well, they've got one undead here. I think this was the last map that was here. Do we have any other maps that might be able to show this a little better? Yeah, there we go. Let's go for Altar the Beyond over here. They should have some undead units. Here, let's go ahead and throw some random stuff in this team, just to be able to show them off a little bit. And then we'll go from there. Just set them all on AI for the moment and have them do their thing. So, okay. So as far as the whole Sanctuary thing, again, in most cases, like in the case of a Cleric... Oh, they don't even have undead here. Ah, lame. In the case of the Cleric there, it's somebody that you really don't want to have in the front line much anyway. In the case of the Knight, you probably want to have them running a lot of their other abilities at that same time. But in the case of something like the Faerie there, if they're already functionally invisible, like they don't need to be tanking anything, they're already doing their support role, there's really little reason to not just go throw them out in the front in some awkward location where they won't run into the one side effect of the Stinky set, which is getting targeted by AoEs, and potentially you just have them going and blocking off, you know, a huge chunk of any undead units that are there. This is especially notable on maps like that one bridge map in Palace of the Dead, where you can simply park them in the middle of it. They can use their high speed to get up to the front there pretty well. And, I mean, they can just kind of control the entire place. You can just have all your ranged units handle stuff from a distance. It's a very interesting tool for a lot of cases, and you'd think it would only be Palace of the Dead, but that's not the case. It's actually really universally useful for a lot of the post-game. Especially if you're using an auto team here, especially if you're running into those cases like in San Bronza. Like, let's say, you know how there's that one undead dragon map up there? And there's just like a shitload of undead dragons, and you never have enough time to deal with all of them until they start AoE spamming everybody. Well, there's your answer right there. Just take a Stinky set Faerie with Sanctuary, throw them out into the center, and suddenly most of those dragons can't even enter the fight. Your AI team is now suddenly bulldozing all of them one at a time without much of an issue. So they're a very interesting tool of a unit to go and utilize for all these things. Obviously, when it comes to a non-Stinky set kind of build, you probably want to give them some relics to be a bit more beefy. Right now, they can get away with a Ring of the Mind on account of the fact that, you know, Stinky set, but realistically, for most situations, I would probably end up running them with at least a Ring of Vit, more equipment that would specialize in Vitality, because those physical hits are definitely a problem for them, especially if there's archers of an opposing element, since they will oftentimes take off half of their health or more. Archers are kind of the natural nemesis, or I guess beginning archers are the natural nemesis of fairies. If they end up getting some defense breaks, they're the natural nemesis of everything. Any darn ways. So, that's about that on this report on the Faerie. Hopefully it was helpful for you. And, oh, actually, no, one more thing I should probably mention, because I keep bringing it up and then never leaving it on the team, because I keep resetting it to experiment with other stuff. But when it comes to fun Ogre Blade type situations, I would argue the Faerie is arguably one of the best chassis for an Ogre build. So, Ogre Blade allows you to transfer skills from one class over into another, right? So, essentially what you do, you take a warrior, you give them the Ogre Blade, you have them hold a Ring of the Dead, you throw them out into a map, you go ahead and give them the Ring of the Dead to transform them into a Lich, and then you have them go and Ogre Blade themselves into the body of a Faerie. Which means that now you have Lich skills on a Faerie, so you've doubled the effectiveness of their Meditate, you've given them Extend, you've given them Nature Power. They have their Stinky set up, they have their... if you want to have a lore set up there with Reflection. Essentially, Reflection overcomes one of the main weaknesses of that Stinky set setup, but at the same time, if you want to run both Pumpkin Lore and Reflection at the same time, that's also a pretty funny combination. Again, I don't know if it's directly because of Pumpkin Lore or because they're a Faerie that it works that way, but it is what it is. And as you saw right there, that's one of the main downsides of having a unreflected Faerie. Because they will oftentimes be targeted by spells. So essentially, even your own friendly units will constantly target them. There's no way that's an accident because it's been that way in every version. So, or rather, I should say, in both versions of the PSP version, One Vision also kept that quirk because it kind of had to. But anyway. Weirdly enough, Stinky Set back in SNES just gave you a luck bonus. I'm not sure why it would make you lucky. In fact, I almost feel like the Alluring Set with its whole luck joke was almost made as a intentional joke about that. Because the Stinky Set used to boost your luck for every level and every piece of equipment that you had it on. Which is certainly an approach, but it didn't really make a whole lot of sense because nobody's getting lucky in that stinky armor. Which is funny because then it ended up changing to the Alluring Set, making everybody lucky, and then the Stinky Set, nobody ever wants to talk to you, and your own friendly units will target you. Anyway, so that will be about that. Y'all have yourselves a good one. Give fairies a shot if you've never tried them. They are shockingly terrifying. And yeah, that's kind of about that. Actually, one thing to point out, one thing I was hoping that they would do here, but if you want to set up a really effective AI-controlled mind control blender, give them their Virtuous Dance, give them their Sanctuary and all of that. Give them their Meditate, some heals. Basically, don't give them any offensive abilities outside of that Virtuous Dance there, and you'll see them using it a lot more often. So, either way, it's just a fun little thing to see. Alright, y'all have yourselves a good one. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.